Welcome to episode 12 of Youth Empowerment Radio. My name is Koala, and today we are interviewing Terri Gentry, the engagement manager for Black communities at the Colorado History Department. We discussed the impact of Martin Luther King Day and how critical Colorado was to the civil rights movement.
The material and information presented here is provided by lived experience youth and is for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of those of the guest only and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
Thank you for being here with us today. We truly appreciate it, and I'm going to go ahead and go right in. So the first question I have for you is, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your work with the Colorado History Department?
My name is Terri Gentry. I am the engagement manager for Black communities at History Colorado, our state museum, and I have a lot of historical history about my family we'll get into some other time.
Oh, yeah, because I was looking up your family and you guys are made up of history yourselves, and I thought that was really cool. So maybe another time we can get more into that. So a follow-up question, what inspired your interest in civil rights history and the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr.?
My family history, specifically my uncle George was dear friends with him and worked with him. My Uncle George was the first Black lieutenant governor of Colorado, and he was was able to work on his campaign when I was a teenager. And he really inspired us to really work on voting and getting that kind of thing done. And my grandparents really honored his work. And there were several other people in the Denver community that knew Dr. King. So it was just a really critical story. I just recently found a picture, something that I'd looked at a long time, and realized that my dad was in the picture with Dr. King. My dad was a police officer for Denver and was standing by Dr. King when he was here. So,
Oh my goodness, that is amazing, and I'm looking jealous. That's awesome, man. And it kind of feels like that wasn't really a long time ago if you think about it, because that's just a few decades back, and just to see his legacy live on is very impressive.
well, for me, it's moments in time for me. That's how we have to live our lives. It's those moments in time and how they impact your life. And I was a little girl when Dr. King was killed, and I remember the impact that it had on my family. My grandparents and my grandmothers were really invested in making sure that we learned about our history. My dad's mom would talk to us about so many things relative to our history and stories. And she was also my dance teacher. So she taught me African dance, jazz, tap, ballet, and all of these significant places that this music and the dance impacted our country and impacted our lives. And she was a professional dancer with her twin sister when they were teenagers and young adults. So I feel like since I was a little girl, I've always had my family around me talking about our history and who we are and what we need to do to achieve our best life. I also remember when Dr. King was killed, and I was in elementary school, and they brought all the students into the auditorium to explain what happened. And my dad's little sister was in high school. So my aunt was in high school, Emmanuel High School, and they grabbed her and some of the other students and took them down to the PBS station so that they could get on and talk to the students about what happened. So I had my aunt to share with me and hundreds of other Denver Public School students about what happened to Dr. King. So that's where I come from, is the people that surround me that want to make sure that we know who we are, know our history, and help us understand these lived experiences.
Wow, that's amazing. I commend your family because being aware of your history is so important, because if you don't know the history, then we're bound to repeat those same mistakes or get stuck in those patterns and cycles. So thank you for sharing that with us. What do you think MLK Day means to people today, and how has its significance evolved over the years?
Well, I think Martin Luther King Day is a time for us to reboot. It's a day for us to reflect on what our experiences have been and looking at what the future holds and standing up and continuing the work that Dr. King was involved in. And Dr. King stood on the shoulders of people that were working to change the history and change our experiences and to fight for equity and freedom in this country. And we need to stand on his shoulders and continue that work.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. Well said. Another question I have is, what are some lesser known aspects of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, or what work do you think deserves more attention? Because I know on MLK Day, people tend to like post like the most popular quotes of his, and I know like some of his work gets undermined.
There's so much, I think, first and foremost, to understand how old he was when he was killed. He was a really young man,
Hmm.
39 years old, and realize he was a family man. He had children and he was married, and his parents and the work his parents were doing, and the work that he intended to do, how he started out when he graduated with his PhD in divinity.
Hmm.
We need to look at the man as the human and the work that he was doing to try to pull all of the folks together in a different forms and fashion. And he suffered a lot of pain. He was arrested. He was injured. There were so many things that happened to him, but the people that walked alongside of him and the people that are still continuing to do the work. I think about the folks that I grew up knowing that live here in Denver that are still working to change our experiences that marched with Dr. King, and some of the ministers that we have, that we still have a couple of the ministers with us that were part of Dr. King's life here, and the work that they continue to do and continue to educate our children and educate our community to work toward our freedom and equity and work toward change. Oh, there's people like Minister Glenda Strong Robinson. She's at Second Baptist Church up in Boulder. She did
Hmm.
the March on Washington. Pernell Steen, he did the March on Washington. He's a jazz musician, that a piano player, incredible prodigy with the piano, that gets up every day looking at what he can do to contribute to our community for our lives to be better. And the list goes on and on with them. So looking at the man, they understood it was a man trying to do bigger things. So the people in the community are men and women that want to stand up and do bigger things and make sure that each and every individual can be who they are and can be celebrated for living their best life. So that's a daily commitment from people that I'm around, that have been my mentors in my family and people around me. I think of my dad. My dad, and the work he did as a member of the Denver Police Department, and wanting to make sure that the police department put their best foot forward in everything that they did. And my aunts and uncles, that all of the work that they did in their respective fields: military, nurses, doctors, community advocates, civic duty, state legislature, the different corporations that they work for, just so many different things that I am honored to be a part of this family that I belong to.
Yeah, that's amazing because for him to have such a good support system and a community that was willing to help him is like very inspiring. Because like the work he did, it's still having an impact today. Because even now, sometimes I'll go on Instagram and I'll still see his daughter post or his other family members. And I know just recently my coworker went to go see his MLK's nephew give a speech about like his experiences he had with them, the effect that MLK's mom dying had on him. So it's just, yeah, very impressive. That's very inspiring too for you guys to continue this work like that. And we truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
What role did Colorado play in the broader civil rights movement?
I think people are always surprised at how much work we were doing. Several times Dr. King came to Colorado to visit, and he was at Macedonia Baptist Church a few times. And then people are surprised he was at Montview Boulevard Presbyterian Church, and he also visited a church out in Littleton, Grace. I think it was Grace. I apologize, I don't remember the full name. They were out in Littleton, Colorado, and community members wanted him to come out and talk to the folks in Littleton. Most of them were not familiar with or had ever been exposed to the Black folks or their experience. So they
Mhm.
invited him out there to talk to them about these experiences and what Dr. King was working on. And and through several visits to Colorado, he had quite a support system around him that wanted to continue the work. And folks are surprised to know how many challenges we had here. We're considered a pretty progressive state, but we still had issues with redlining. We still had issues with segregation. We still had issues with equal access to employment, with equal access to education. There were a myriad of things that were happening, and he was addressing folks to help them get the perspective and understand the work that our community members were doing so that we could gain equity and we could gain access to resources and we could gain efforts to give our children a better life and better chance and better experiences.
That's very good to know because I feel like whenever people talk about the civil rights movements, at least from my experience, I've never heard Colorado get mentioned for most parts. So you learn something new every day.
We have a small Black community in Colorado, so the ratio of Black folks to the general population in Colorado is relatively small compared to the southeastern states or the East Coast. But we're here nonetheless and want to make our lives better and want to have access. And I think about some of the horrific experiences that my family has endured over the years and some of the lingering effects of some of those horrific experiences that continue to impact our lives. So I won't get into all that, but I could sit
It's okay.
and we could talk for about 6 or 7 hours about specific incidents that my family members have experienced in their lives and the personal experiences that I've had, and want to make sure that my children, grandchildren, our family members in our community have better experiences and not have to confront some of those challenges and try to avert some of the things that we're witnessing as history is repeating itself now.
Yeah, that must be very hard. And I'm sorry you guys even had to experience that in the first place because that's not okay. But I'm glad that we're working towards trying to like make things better for the future generation.
My hope is that we can get these generations that are coming up the minute you turn 18, go out and get your voting registration done. That's the first thing.
Yes.
Folks are excited about getting their driver's license. Go get your
Mhm.
voting membership, get your voting registration done, and and do things that help uplift your community. So don't be complacent and sit
Yeah.
back and think, well, this doesn't affect me. Yes, it does. And it takes each and every one of us to stand up for the right of the community. We've got to stand up for our community and make sure that each and every person has full access to living their best life and not be demonized or penalized for who they are.
There's no reason people should be treated differently based on something they can't control, like their race, gender, or sexual identity. Like that's just something that's a part of who they are. Like they shouldn't have to pay for that.
Yeah, and each individual should be honored and respected. each one of us, and be able to do what we can to contribute to this society and this planet. We should be able to be able to get up and not be afraid of stepping out the door.
Exactly. What progress do you think has been made in achieving civil rights since MLK's time?
Well, the things that we've seen happen to and have achieved are being eroded. For example, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2015, and Dr. King was instrumental in having the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 signed back then so that we could not have to pay poll taxes and not have to take these crazy tests to vote and not have these restrictions. Well, since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, now there are polling places that have been closed, so we may have to stand in line for hours. There are other restrictions that have been put in place, and a lot of the systems that we have been shut down. So, you have to be careful of, depends on where you are, somebody making sure that you don't have full access to voting because they don't want your vote to count. So, we have probably one of the best and simplest voting systems in the country with mail-in ballots and things like that. So when you're voting and you have such easy access to it, get up and go do it. And know about the people that are standing in line for 10 hours and you can't give them a bottle of water and they can't leave the line to go to the restroom or to eat or anything else. They have to stand in that line till they have the right to vote. There's
That's
so much work that we need to do to change that and get those voting rights back.
definitely that is so crazy. It's like you feels like we're taking a step forward, but then we get pushed back. Because things
Yeah.
could have definitely been so much simpler. It's just some people in power choose to make it more complicated when it doesn't have to be.
Right. And your question was about our successes. And I see we've made progress on some things, but I don't see success. I don't use that term success because we're not there yet. We started at the starting line in 1470 and the starting line is 0 and we way
Mhm.
back here. So we don't even see the starting line.
Right?
We're still working to get to the starting line to run the race. We're not
Exactly.
there. We're not there yet. So it's work in progress. And every day it requires you get up and do something to move that progress forward. Every single day. There's never a down day. There's no break. And you don't sit on the sidelines and watch it happen. You have to get up and do something and say something and move it forward.
Yeah, it's very true. Still work to be done, but it has to be done because if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it. The next question I have for you is how does studying history help us understand and navigate current social justice issues?
Well, I think the critical thing is to understand the laws of the land. So go back to the very first laws that were put in place, the Constitution, the state laws that were put in place around the country, the changes that have happened in the laws and how they move us forward and move us back. You can go back and look at Plessy versus Ferguson in the 1890s, and the Supreme Court ruled separate but equal. Well,
Mhm.
you can separate, but there's no such thing as equal in that. And Brown versus Board of Education that in Topeka, Kansas in 1954. In Denver, we had Keys versus Denver Public Schools. That lawsuit was filed in 1971 and was put in effect 1973. And the law was rescinded in 1993. So our schools are back to being they're back to being segregated as much as they were before 1971. And so you look at all of the laws, policies, and practices and the timeline of all of those things that have happened and recognize that some of those laws are being ignored. Some of the laws have been rescinded. And it's difficult to push through and say that law is in place when people don't agree or believe in it. So we've got to understand that as well, is that just because a law is in place doesn't mean it's been enacted or pushed forward. You look at some of the things that are happening with the migrant population, and they're working on the farm, and it makes you wonder if they're still considered slave labor, even though we were supposed to gain our freedom with 13th Amendment back in
Mhm.
1865. So, and the other things that have happened with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and we still see some places, and I'm not saying that all the migrants are experiencing that, but there's a few pockets around the state, around the country where you don't hear from those folks. They stay under the radar because they're making sure that the folks that are working on their land, they don't have any rights, so they can't complain about the lack of rights and the way they're being treated. And then some of the other things that you see, the disparities, still income inequality around the country, and you still see challenges with equity to gain education. And now we're looking at rescinding the DEI. And so how's that going to impact our country too?
Yeah, because I was following the news about the Equal Opportunity Act being revoked. Because I've just seen like a lot of people online or people I'm close to, like, yeah, I got a job offer, but that it just got rescinded because of Trump's order.
Mhm.
And it's kind of frustrating because the workforce, there's barely any diversity to begin with. And I feel like some people probably already ignored the act before it was revoked. But with it like being, if it's going to be gone now, then they're not going to have any excuses to diversify the workplace, or even seeing like big companies like Meta just getting rid of their DEI programs just like that. It just shows you. I don't know. It's just baffling.
The one thing I guess I think about is when those things were not in place within our community, we had our own small businesses and we had our own systems to keep our communities strengthened and elevated. And instead of going after those jobs that nobody wants you in, why don't you create your own and work within our community and design a system that supports our community, have our own AI, have our own internet system, have our own, all of those things. And we can create our own infrastructure. We had our own infrastructure before, and then
Mhm.
with integration things, one of the side effects is, spreading out and some of that infrastructure is disintegrated. So we need to come back and reconnect with our churches, reconnect with our community members, recreate an infrastructure system and redesign our lives so that our communities are thriving. And it can be multi-ethnic communities. I'm not speaking about strictly one group over another, but as we have a lot of folks in the community from different ethnic backgrounds and resources, we can come together as a community and take care of ourselves instead of hoping that we can go outside of the community and get that job. Let's create it within our own community.
Yeah, for sure. That's very true. Because I feel like together we all could be like very innovative.
Hmm.
Another question I have is, what advice would you give to young people who want to get involved in civil rights advocacy today?
Absolutely, go for it. There's several community organizations. National Council of Negro Women are coming to Colorado for a convention soon. We've got the NAACP. We've got different chapters. The I don't know, the members of the fraternities and sororities, if you're in college, that's another good resource. And they help to come back and educate our children and upgrade what they're doing. And so seek out those organizations, work with community members, sit down and have a serious conversation with your neighbors about what needs to happen next. And activism is more effective when you've got multitudes of people working together to make the changes. Get up and go vote. Don't sit back and, well, I'm not happy with. Get up and go vote. Investigate the people that are running for office so that you know what their platforms are and know how that's going to impact you, and the one that's about the greater good, you vote for that person. And the more people get up and vote, the better chance we'll have of people that are invested in the greater good of the community.
Right on. Because I feel like there's a lot of power in like working together or even voting. Because there is a time in history where like a lot of people weren't even allowed to vote. So it should be like considered like a blessing, less privilege to be able to do it today. Because there's been necessary steps put in place for people to be able to register. And you're also right about people trying to sit and not do anything. Because if you're being quiet and just complaining about what's going on, if you don't do anything, then things are not going to change because you're not taking action to address what's going on.
Yeah, and this is an issue of, and I say to thine own self be true, but also to your neighbor and to our community. And so, if you do the very best that you can do, and you have the greater good in your heart, and making sure that your neighbors are taken care of, that's the critical part. And so, do your best to live your best life, but that needs to also include making sure that people around you have an opportunity to live their best life. And so voting and these community organizations, getting out and doing things, even, maybe you go volunteer at your church to help with a food bank. Maybe you get out and you create a community garden. Maybe you get out and march with your former classmates so that the school system is better. Some of your classmates, maybe they need to go to school and become teachers and educators so they can go in the schools and do the education of our children. When I think back about the teachers that I had growing up, we need that again. So there's so many things that you can do to uplift the community, but in whatever route you take, you've got to think about the greater good, and you've got to think about how it's going to impact your neighbors and what it's going to do with our community. How's it going to help our community? What is the best option to move forward so that we have a stronger, safer, viable, equitable community?
Almost makes me want to say amen right now, but I know we're not in church. But so I have two more questions for you and then we should be done. So this one, I know you've kind of like covered the base and like what people should do, but what is one message or takeaway you hope listeners will remember after this conversation?
Most importantly, there's so much stuff out here to try to demonize and minimize who each of us are. And don't take that and go out. The most horrific thing I've been hearing are people going out and killing their friends and neighbors because of some super remark. Think more about yourself. Think about who you are. Why are you here? What is the message that you want to extend about your life? And do that. Also, I love giving homework for the children to interview their parents and grandparents so they get a better sense of who they are. So interview your parents and grandparents and get their stories and their history so you understand their life experience and understand all of the things that they did that you're here. And then when you learn all of those things, you discover that your assignment is to move their legacy forward and make a better life for yourself and for the people around you. So go out and do that. But most importantly, recognize, and my idea is that if we're all created in the image of God, the image and likeness of God, don't make mistakes. We're all part of that. So we need to live according to the way God gave us that instruction to do that.
Very true. Thank you. Final question, and then we will be letting you go because we know you're a very busy woman. Are there any upcoming events, exhibits, or resources at the Colorado History Department that listeners should know about?
We have some wonderful programming coming up. If you want to get on our History Colorado website and look at our events calendar, there's something almost every day. In February, we'll have Kevin John Goff, who's a great nephew of Hattie McDaniel, coming in to talk about her life experience. In March, we'll have Black Cowboy, Maurice Wade, and the comic strip writer R. Allen Brooks coming in to talk about Black Cowboys. And there's several other events coming up throughout the year. We have different programs in place. One is called the Museum of Memory. We're in the community and want to get the oral histories and photos and stories of people in the community on different things. So we've been around the state working on that. I'm still working on projects. Like I'm wrapping up with the Whittier neighborhood and the Lincoln Hills exhibit. And Lincoln Hills, Colorado, is an a Black-owned resort up in Lincoln Hills, Colorado. It's about 35 miles west of Denver. And we've been working with them. They're upgrading our exhibit here at History Colorado. So we want you to come out this summer and check that out. And the work that our community members are doing, we try to make sure that we have a newsletter to let you know, different newsletters to let you know things that we're working on and our community members are working on. So stay in touch with us about different things. We also love collaborating with other museums. So if you have an opportunity to get out and explore Colorado, not only History Colorado Museum, but we've got the Fort Garland Museum that talks about Buffalo Soldiers down in southern Colorado. In Denver, we have the Black American West Museum and Heritage Center in the former home of Dr. Justina Ford, the first Black woman licensed doctor in Colorado. We have Stiles African American Heritage Center over on 26th and Glenarm Place. The Blair Caldwell African American Research Library, one of 5 research libraries in the country, African American research libraries in the country. And they have a beautiful museum up on the 3rd floor. There's Museo de las Americas that's in the area. There are a number of other museums, and there's the Black Girl Museum downtown that just opened recently. You got to go check that out. So by all means, explore our community and learn about places that share history and information about who we are. And if you need help with finding resources, History Colorado wants to be an access to resources to help you find those things.
Wow, that's amazing. I will definitely have to check those things out. That didn't realize we have that so many things available in Colorado. I'm from Ohio, so I recently moved here, so I didn't think there was that much out here. So that's good to know.
There's a lot here. And we have a very, very rich history here. And not just the Black community, Latino community, Native American community, Jewish community. We want to make sure that folks understand that we're not talking about just one group of people. We want to make sure that everybody has access. Everybody's been impacted. Mm-hmm. We have a Chinese exhibit. Chinatown was attacked in the 1880s downtown. We have an exhibit here at History Colorado about the Chinese community. We want people to come out and learn about who they are and who their neighbors are and discover so much about the place that we live. So please come check us out. But check out all of these other resources around the metro area and the state for that matter. I mean, we've got museums all over the state. You've got to go check them out.
Awesome. I will definitely do that. For sure. Well, thank you so much for doing this podcast with us. It was very insightful and informative, and we truly appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to talk to you. Appreciate it very much.